Good afternoon. I'm just going to wait a few seconds to make sure that everyone who wants to join us is in before I start formally. But welcome and thank you for joining me today for my session. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start officially. I will keep an eye on the question and answer section, but if it's okay with you, I will answer any questions in the last 5 minutes just so that I can focus on my presentation. The recording and the slides, or at least some of them, will be made available to you after the session. So do feel free to make notes, but if you want to just sit back and relax, everything will be sent to you post conference. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Bonjour, Mario. It's lovely to see some familiar faces on the chat too. So thank you very much again for joining. Okay, so hopefully you can see my main screen now. So my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Suzi Bewell, and I am first and foremost a languages teacher, but I'm also involved in teacher education, and I run my own consultancy, Polyglot Languages. So today I'm going to be talking to you about a fantastic project that I've been involved in with Leeds Development Education Centre. And the project is called World Class Teaching. And it's been about my involvement in creating 20 free resources in French and Spanish and German, helping languages teachers like yourselves to teach the Sustainable Development Goals in languages lessons. So moving on, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then the main focus of today's session will be where the project came from, some concrete examples to share with you in French, Spanish and German, how you can get these resources for free, and then just a few concluding thoughts at the end. So I've been teaching languages for over 22 years. And as I said earlier, I'm predominantly a teacher. That's where my heart lies. I'm a British Council and e-twinning ambassador, so I'm a real advocate of global learning and international partnerships. I'm also the honorary membership officer for the Association for Language Learning. And when I'm not teaching and training, I love baking and dressing up and going to gigs, which obviously at the moment isn't happening. Okay, so I wanted to mention, first of all, how I got involved in all things internationalism and global education. So, as I said just now, I'm an e-twinning ambassador for the British Council, and e-twinning has helped me to connect with teachers and schools and classrooms all over the world. So if it's something that you haven't ever heard about, then I would genuinely encourage you to find out more. So many benefits, not just for students and teachers, but for schools. And as a result of my involvement in all things e-twinning, my most recent school received the International Schools Award. That was back in November of 2018. So it then led me to go on to write some storybooks of my own. So through my consultancy, Polyglot Languages, I've always had a huge interest in the wider Francophone world. And so I've written storybooks for children from France, about Belgium, Switzerland, Quebec, and my most recent story is all about Maroc. So if you'd like to find out more about those, please do get in touch. So following on from all of that, I was invited in March 2019 to join the team at Leeds Development Education Centre to write, and I have to say, alongside a team of amazing language teacher volunteers. My role was to write the 23 French lessons. My main subject area is French, and they were to be focused on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to show you what they are in just a second. I should also mention at this stage that the resources, the 23 lessons, are also available for maths teachers, science teachers, and for RE and citizenship teachers. So once you've seen this presentation, if you do work in a school with maths or science or RE teacher colleagues, please do feel free to pass on my details, and I'd be more than happy to tell them where they can download the free resources for their subject area. So the 23 French lessons on the SDGs, unfortunately, just because of the nature of the curriculum and the exams that the students pass, not all of the Sustainable Development Goals were necessarily, they weren't all suited to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I drew out the ones which you can see ticked and starred, which I felt suited a kind of traditional scheme of learning. So those themes were poverty, hunger, well-being and health, education, equality, clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption, life underwater, life on land, and climate action. So what I'm going to do in the next part of the session is go through these different lessons. I'm not going to be able to show you all of them, but hopefully I will be able to show you or give you a glimpse of some of the work that myself and the team at Leeds Development Education Centre have been engaging in. And I will finish by showing you where you can download some of those resources for free. So maybe starting our Spanish lesson with a question, what do you think we're going to be learning about? So we show them some engaging images. So this is the first lesson from the Spanish series, El Cambio Climático. So each of the lessons has its own curriculum objectives. So I'll leave you to read those. So linked to the development goal of climate change, using authentic resources. There's a grammatical link there using connectives and linking words, and there's a real link to listening skills and listening for detail. The global learning objectives are also laid out. These are linked to what we call the big ideas. And you can see at the bottom, our lessons are also aligned to SMSC. So here is the Spanish lesson, the environment and social impacts of climate change. So initially we would present some vocabulary to the students. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got the vocabulary in Spanish, and the right-hand side, we've got the vocabulary in English. And then looking at social consequences of climate change, presenting some of this vocabulary so that hopefully by the end of this unit of work, the students will be in a position to be able to describe some of the consequences that they now are aware of. The first task would be matching the photographs, which come as a separate document with the correct Spanish words. So obviously at the moment in COVID teaching times, it's quite difficult to give students cards to match and so on. So you have to imagine that we can do this interactively, even though we can't at the moment. The second task, going through the different solutions, and then also playing a memory game whereby the students would be given some cards in Spanish, and then some matching images, and they would be asked to cut up those images and word cards and play a memory game just to see how much they can remember from their pre-learning. The follow-on lesson, again, the curriculum objectives would be shared, the global learning objectives along with the SMSC values. And then as a starter activity in a follow-on lesson, the students will be asked to play the memory game again in pairs using the cards from the last lesson. So just as a quick recap and to see how much they can recall from the previous lesson. The next task would involve creating a mind map. So the students would take turns to choose a Spanish term and stick it onto the mind map. And then they would be asked to draw lines between the different terms to show their understanding of the relationship between the different social and environmental impacts of climate change. They would then be expected to use the new vocabulary and the help box to annotate their mind maps to explain the relationships. And obviously the aim of this activity is for them to speak lots of Spanish. Then we have got a word grid here where they've got some more extended vocabulary in Spanish and in English, and some examples at the bottom of the sorts of things that they might like to say. Okay, so moving on now to a French example, and this I have to say is one of my favourite examples of all of the lessons that I wrote. So I'll show you both of the lessons. These are 2 out of the 20 lessons in French, and this is around the theme of zero poverty. So the curriculum objectives for the French lesson, there'll be some basic translation work from French into English, some extended reading using authentic texts, potentially some dictionary work depending on the level of the learners, skimming and scanning a text for gist and key points, group work involving all 4 skills, and some basic speaking presentation skills. Again, we've got the big ideas and the global learning objectives. So hopefully by the end of this series of lessons, students would understand that all humans have rights, including the right to accommodation, the right to decent living conditions. Students would know that poverty exists to a greater or lesser extent in all countries, including their own. They can explain the difference between absolute and relative poverty, give examples of the structures that cause and perpetuate poverty, and they can describe examples of action to address poverty on a global, national, and local level. So as a starter, so there you've got highlighted the what's included in the first lesson. 2 quotations from Nelson Mandela, and just present these as a very basic starter task and ask the students to pull out any words that they recognise. Can they spot any cognates? Can they work out what the sense of the text is, just to get them, just as a bit of a lead in into the lesson. Now, when I was planning these lessons, it made me think about whether I should focus on poverty within the United Kingdom or poverty elsewhere. And I think the obvious choice would have been to focus on poverty in the underdeveloped world. But what I decided to do, and this was before Marcus Rashford entered into the news talking about holiday hunger, I started to look at the increase in the number of food banks in the United Kingdom. Now, at the bottom of this slide, and you'll receive some of these slides at the end of the session, there's a link to a video from the French TV company Arte. So you could show the video link, which would be some authentic listening, and then look at the text and see how you might exploit that in the lesson. So in terms of a comprehension activity, once the students have read the previous slide and digested it, they would be asked to choose from the 2 choices here in each of the sentences. So has there been an increase or a decrease in the number of food banks? Is poverty improving or getting worse? Are people's basic needs often met or always met? How many children experience hunger in the UK? And are food banks even more important or less important in the school holidays? So very topical in current times. And this was written about 1.5 years ago. So there we've got our answers. And then we've got a quote here from a single mum, and this was taken from an authentic resource, a young mum living in Hull. For those of you who don't speak French, she's 23, she has a 4-year-old daughter. Because of the nature of her living alone, she isn't able to work the kind of hours that she needs to be able to bring home a decent salary. She relies on food banks or finding items of food and drink that are at lower prices that are often distributed by supermarkets. And she said at the bottom, when you are a single mum, sometimes this gets me a bit choked up. There are very few jobs that allow you to drop your child off at school and to go to work and come home at 2:30 to collect them. I often miss meals so that my daughter can eat. So here we've got some comprehensive questions. So not just around the theme of holiday hunger, but can they spot some of the basic details like where do they live? How old is this woman? Does she have a son or a daughter? How old are they? Why has she taken to go to a food bank? What prevents her from working? And what does she do to ensure that her child eats? And then we've got our answers here on the next slide. Then we've got a text here, which is all about holiday hunger. So in a bit more detail, a bit more of a complex text. And the students would read that, and then they have got a running dictation task. So essentially, for those of you who maybe don't know what a running dictation is, they would have a copy of this perhaps on the outside of the classroom door, and in small groups, one student at a time would leave the classroom or stand up to go and read the text. And on their tables, they would have a copy of this one, which has got quite a few gaps to fill. And then what they would have to do in their teams is go backwards and forwards to try and remember or memorize the words that are missing. And essentially what I've done is try and pull out some of the key words that I think they would need to be able to understand this text. And then here at the end of that activity, you would share the answers with the learners and go through the meaning of that in a bit more detail. Now for the second lesson, again, our curriculum objectives, which have changed slightly. So this time we're looking at interpretation of data and recap of higher numbers, translation skills from English to French and French to English, potential for dictionary skills, skimming and scanning a text for key points, and speaking presentation skills. The big ideas and global learning objectives remain the same. So here we've got what's called a Carte de la pauvreté infantile au Royaume-Uni, and it's a numbers task looking at child poverty in the UK. And then as a bit more of a positive slant on this, we're looking at a charitable organisation called Spreading the Happiness, who do fantastic work around the UK to help alleviate child poverty. So here, if you click on the hyperlink at the top, it will take you to an interactive map of Great Britain. And when you hover over different parts of the map, so on this one, for example, I've taken a screenshot of Northwest Durham, it will tell you in English from data that was generated in May of last year, what percentage of children in that particular area are suffering in poverty. And then the task itself is for the students to go onto that website and answer the question, quel est le taux de pauvreté infantile dans ces 10 grandes villes britanniques? So you're given the example there of Northwest Durham, and then I've picked some different towns and cities across the UK, and the students have got to hover over those places, assuming their geographical awareness, and then include the data. So if you look here, you've got the responses. And some quite shocking statistics there. In Liverpool, in the Walton area, 39.1% of children living in poverty. In Scarborough and Whitby, which is closer to home for me, 30.7%. So some really startling figures there. And I think when I have done this with a group of students, they're always really keen to hover over their own area and see what the statistics represent. Now, because it could be a bit all doom and gloom, because these sustainable development goals are quite meaty, hard-hitting topics, we also wanted to focus on key actions that people can do and get involved in. So we want the children not only to learn about what the sustainable development goals are, but also to have them take action once they've engaged in the lessons and actually do something positive to try and improve the current situation. So here we've got a good friend and colleague of mine, Jeanette, and she created a charity called Spreading Happiness. And any money that she raises as part of this charity pays for these huge food parcels, which go out to English families who are really struggling to feed their children in the school holidays. There's a basic translation text which focuses on this charity, what the problem is, what the mission of the charity is, and how they do what they do. And then, as a research task, we've got some key questions there. How many children in the world are suffering from child poverty? Do you know the difference between relative and absolute poverty? How many people in the world survive on less than $1.25 a day? And according to your research, is the current situation improving or getting worse? And does that depend on where you live in the world? So some really hard-hitting questions there. We couldn't include everything we wanted to in these resources. So on some of the slides, you'll also see there are links to various external resources like Un jour un actu and Brut in French, which contain some fantastic resources if you wanted to do some follow-on work. The next resource I want to present to you is Gleichberechtigung der Geschlechter. So this is all about gender equality, and this is the second of a series of 2 lessons. So here our curriculum outcomes are the use of authentic materials, skimming reading for key information, translation from German to English, the learning of GCSE key vocabulary, and improved fluency and accuracy in the target language. So just want to say at this point that the people who wrote these lessons are generally teachers or ex-teachers, and the focus really has been on trying to bring the existing GCSE curriculum to life. So we've tried to focus on existing schemes of work, and the lessons and the tasks that we've created can be standalone and can be slotted into existing schemes of work, or they could be taught as a series of 20 lessons as part of a project. So the global learning outcomes here, naming the different influences which can create gender norms, explain how gendered stereotypes are created and they have negative repercussions. Students can explain how gender norms can change over time and explain how appropriate behaviours are taught to both men and women. And students are more aware that gender discrimination can affect half of humanity. So moving forward, we're looking at some photo image prompts. So as we know, the new GCSE requires students to use photo images and be able to use techniques like the Palm W technique to be able to answer in basic French or Spanish or German, to be able to say what is there in the photo. So here we've got the idea of toys for boys and toys for girls. So I think that's a really stark image there. And then another one here that they might want to comment on. Now for this task, the students would be given the title, Wenn du ein Junge bist, darfst du nicht. So when you're a boy, you mustn't. And then we've got a whole list of things like play with toys and dolls, dress in pink, dance, be sad, show your emotions, have long hair. So really what we want the students to do here is try and dispel gender stereotypes. Of course, it's okay for boys to play with girls. Of course, it's okay for them to show their emotions and have long hair and be annoyed. In this next one, we've got some examples of what boys can do. Can they play football? Can they be dancers? Can they wear clothes that contain glitter? So really getting the students to think about their own preconceived ideas. When it comes to girls, can they have short hair? Can they get their clothes dirty? Can they be interested in politics? Can they jump around in puddles, laugh out loud? So some really great ideas there for the students to look at each of those and decide whether it is something that girls can or shouldn't do. Can they be shy? Can they become teachers? Can they become artists? Could they become an astronaut or a president or a firewoman? So we've got a little bit of a poem there. Junge oder Mädchen, alles ist möglich. In der Schule oder zu Hause, im Garten oder bei deinen Freunden. Du kannst sein, wer immer du sein möchtest. Hauptsache, du bist glücklich. So the lesson here really is you can be anything that you want to be. Towards the end of this lesson, we're going to have a look at the differences in terms of gender between boys and girls. So is this a yes or a no answer? So for example, do all women have the right to vote? Can people in different countries, can women all over the world have a bank account? So some really interesting facts there that perhaps the students won't be aware of. And then we've got the yes and no answers on the next slide. Some more here. Can women drive? Can they play sport all over the world? And again, we've got a yes and no answers just there. As I said earlier, each of our lessons contains an action point. So within this lesson on gender equality, we've got this equality now, a just world for women and girls. And we've got the website link at the bottom. So really encouraging our learners, once they've engaged in the lesson, to look at some of these websites and think about what they can do personally, what action they can take to make the world a better and different place. Now, the next lesson that I want to show you, and I think this is the last one in the series, just so that we can allow for some time for any questions and so that I can share where you can actually get these resources. This one is about water and sanitation. And I think as someone who is a toilet twinning ambassador, and there is such a thing, this is a subject that's really close to my heart. So for lesson one, this is all about les toilettes, un sujet sérieux. Now, on the 19th of November, so coming up very soon, every year is la Journée Mondiale des Toilettes. And what we do as a starter activity in this task is to give the students some colloquial words for toilet, and they have to work out from the 9 given which one doesn't mean a toilet in French. And if you want to use the chat to write in your answers, then please do feel free to do so. So the correct answer is le bidet. All of the others do mean toilet in French. And then once we've done our quick intro, we've got a text here, quite an extended reading text about la Journée Mondiale des Toilettes. So here it describes on the 19th of November, it's World Toilet Day, and it explains how many people in the world don't have a toilet, how many people, that there are lots of people in the world who are obliged to go outside to do their duties. And certainly this is something that affects children and can also lead to illnesses. So a really important and serious issue. Here we've got an infographic which is taken from the lovely people at Journée, I think. And you've got some statistics there. So 1 in 3 people in the world doesn't have a safe toilet. Children are also concerned in the world, 1 school in 3 doesn't have a toilet. So again, some really stark facts here. So we'd give the students a copy of the infographic, and then we would ask them to find within the text the 6 different adjectives in French and then to translate them in English. So there, for example, we've got mondial, and then that means in English world. Then we've got some key facts and figures, again, relating to the infographic. So are these facts and figures true or are they false? So is it true or false that 1 person in 5 in the world has access to a safe toilet? Is it true or false that 1 person in 8 has to go to the toilet outside? Is it true or false that 1 school in every 5 doesn't have toilets? So again, some really interesting facts that perhaps the students aren't really aware of or just never really thought about. Then we've got our answers. So the false ones, it's actually 1 person in 3 in the world has access to a safe toilet. The 19th of November, as I said earlier, is World Toilet Day. and 1 school in every 3 doesn't have toilets. I think because this is a poo related lesson and sometimes young people are fascinated by all things poo and wee. What I think is great about this lesson is that I think it captures their imagination, but actually it is a really serious topic that needs addressing, that students do really need to learn about, and why not in their languages lessons. Now here we've got a copy of another infographic. And again, we've got some more key facts there around toilets and what the impact of not having a toilet might do to a child's life. Here you can see them a little bit more close up. So if you look at the bottom, for example, the top 5 complaints of schools and sixth form colleges. There's no toilet paper, the smell of urine, there's a lack of soap or tissues, the dirtiness, and just things are not as new or pleasant as they could be. So looking at that second infographic, here we've got another activity where in English the students have got to show their understanding of the text by responding to the 10 questions. And and there should be another slide in there, I think, with the answers. So again, we talked earlier about the importance of taking action. So not just engaging the students in these lessons and having them have an awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals and what the main world issues are at the moment, but also wanting to do something active about it. So here we've got the website whogivesacrap.org, and this is an organisation who make bamboo and recycled toilet paper and donate 50% of their profits to sanitation projects worldwide. As a toilet twinning ambassador, I also wanted to mention here the amazing work of the people at Toilet Twinning. They do some fantastic work. I'm currently raising money on their behalf ahead of World Toilet Day. Awareness raising, going into schools, scout groups, teaching people about the importance of sanitation and the fact that so many people in the world don't have a toilet. I think there are statistics that state that more people in the world have access to a mobile phone than a toilet, which is just a crazy statistic in any world. So people at Toilet Twinning raise money, and you can twin your toilets. I'm sure you've seen these in various organisations. Maybe your school twins its toilets. But for every £60 that you raise, you can then twin your toilet with a toilet overseas. And since lockdown, they've also been twinning little portable sinks as well. So some great work there. It's worth mentioning here that the work that we've been doing at Leeds Development Education Centre was funded with support from the European Commission, and we are monitoring the use of these resources. So in a second, I'm going to share with you how you can access these resources. The presentation that I'm going to share with you post conference will be an abbreviated version of this, but if you do want any of the resources, then please do get in touch with me directly. So if you go to the following website, leedsdec.co.uk/climate action VM, just give you a second to make a note of that. It will give you access in the first instance to our climate action resources. And as I said earlier, these are not just for languages teachers, but they're also for teachers of RE, of maths, science, and citizenship. What you do with the sign up, so you can see in the screenshot here, is just give us your name and your email address. We promise that we won't get in touch with you unless you give us consent to do so. And really, the purpose of this is just so that we can monitor for our European funding how many teachers and students have affected, and perhaps we might get in touch with you to ask you about your feedback on these resources, whether you found them useful, whether your students have engaged with them, and so on. So leedsdec.co.uk/climate action VM. And this is just a screenshot of what you'll see if you go onto that website. So here you can see the climate change lessons. So for modern languages, for maths, for RE citizenship, into the languages section, and this will be the exact same for all of the other languages resources. You've got the option of French, German, and Spanish. Again, I must say a huge thank you to all of those teacher colleagues who volunteered and gave tireless numbers of hours to translate the resources into German and Spanish. I was only responsible for the French version and creating the initial resources. So those teachers of German and Spanish, who were very much volunteers, have done an amazing job. And some of those are just being proofread as we speak. So you can download all of the climate action ones for now, and all of the other resources will be on our Leeds DC website very soon. If you'd like to register for updates, then please do contact Hannah, who is our team project lead. We're based out of Leeds, so you can telephone Hannah on the number given there, or you can just drop her an email to say that you've attended today's session and that you are keen to find out more. And that's just hannah@leedsdec.org.uk. And our website for all of our other resources is just leedsdec.co.uk. I'm just going to go back for a second just to give you time to make a note again of that key website address, leedsdc.co.uk, Climate Action VM. That's the one where you can sign up to register for the climate action resources in French, Spanish and German. And if you click to say that you would like us to keep in touch when all of the other resources which I've talked to you about today are available to download, you will be given an alert about that. Okay, so just a few concluding thoughts. We've got about 10 minutes to spare, so I'm hoping that some of you might have some questions in the chat for me. So please do write any chats or any comments or questions for me. These high quality teaching resources are free, so I think that's the key thing for me. They're not going to cost you a penny to download. And I personally, having taught languages for 21 years, I honestly think that we owe it to our learners to teach them about global issues. These resources were all written by teacher educators like myself. They've been very much aligned with the exam board expectations and can easily be integrated into existing schemes of work. If you wouldn't mind helping us to spread the word, we would really appreciate that, just to get the news out to as many teachers as possible. So if you do work with colleagues in the RE department or PSHE department, or you've got colleagues who teach maths, then it would be great if you could let them know about the resources as well. So just to conclude, I've put my details there, suzibewell@gmail.com. There's also a link to my website where you can have a look at some of the other resources that I've written and been involved in. And if you want to follow the work of Leeds DEC, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/DEC Leeds. When I share my details, I do genuinely love to hear from teacher colleagues like yourselves. So please do drop me a line if there's anything that you desperately want to have access to, just while we're finalising and proofreading those resources. If you've seen something today that you would like to use in your lesson on Monday, I'm sure that I can make that available to you and let you have that. But I have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure presenting today and just sharing with you the results of this project. It's been a real labour of love for everyone involved. There have been many hours, lots of blood, sweat and tears shed as a result of all of the hard work and effort that has gone into creating these lessons. But given that they're free and given that you are here today, I think there's an interest in the work that we're doing. And if you do download them and you find them interesting, then please do let your fellow MFL colleagues know about them and share the word. That would be fantastic. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for now and I'm just going to go back into the chat and the question and answers. So hopefully there'll be some questions there for me to answer just in the last few minutes. So, do we have any resources for English? Currently, the resources that we've written are in French, Spanish and German. But if you are interested in the resources in English, then when you download them, there's nothing to stop you from adapting those and switching them into English. And if you do that, or if you're part of a group of teachers who choose to do that, we would love to have access to those so that we can help you to disseminate those to other people. Do you have any primary resources? I'm currently working as a TA, but we teach in Spanish to year 5 and 6. The resources that we wrote were written mainly with Key Stage 3 and 4 in mind. However, I think there are certainly some of the lessons that could be pared down or adapted to be suitable for younger learners. I'm thinking in particular of one of the lessons that I wrote, which was about gender equality. And there's a fantastic, I think she's Canadian author called Elise Gravel. And she very kindly gave us permission to use some of her storybooks and posters. You may well have come across her if you are a French teacher. And so one of the resources, which I think has been translated into Spanish, includes pictures that were linked to what I spoke about in the German lesson, which were around what boys and girls can and can't do. So I think if you were teaching adjectives, for example, in your Spanish lessons with year 5 and 6, I think that would be a perfect thing to do, but perhaps just as a solitary activity rather than teaching the other elements of that lesson. We've got a question here from Fiona. I understand that these resources are intended for teachers and for GCSE level. However, are teachers from other countries welcome to use them? I'm not a teacher quite yet, but I'm studying to become one. Including the UN Sustainable Goals has been one of the things which has terrified me. Okay, well, please don't be terrified. I hope I've allayed any fears that you have and shown that it really can be quite a pleasurable and interesting thing to do. The resources are available. They've been produced by teachers in England. However, they are available to anybody who accesses our website. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're in Scotland or the other side of the world. Fiona, if you want to contact me off the chat or just directly, Suzi Bewell at gmail.com. I can also direct you to some fantastic work that's been going on in Scotland as well around sustainable development goals. So you may well know about that already, but it's kind of a partner project to the one that we've been running in Leeds. So I'd be more than happy to share that with you. Anthony says, many thanks, Suzi. Could you advise again which numbers of the SDGs you don't cover? Although, of course, there are many links. Yeah, I'll go back into my presentation in just a second, Anthony, and I'll let you know what they are. So if you just bear with me, I'll need to just pop back onto the presentation. I'm just having a quick look in the chat before I do that, Anthony. So we've got some hellos from Poland, gosh, from Italy. We have got Fran from Nottingham who's saying that she's loving it. Thank you so much, that's inspiring. So Maria, you will get access to some of these slides, but I think the main thing to remember is the link to the Leeds DEC website. And if the resources that you require aren't currently there, then just contact me directly and I can make sure that you access those before they go live, if that's okay. So thank you for all of your positive comments. So just for Anthony, I'm going to go back into the presentation. And if I can just, I'm going to have to go backwards. Let me just come out of the presentation. Can I do that? If I stop sharing, so I'm going to have to bear with me just a second while I exit the presentation and go back to the earlier slides. So there we go. Right, Anthony, I'll be back with you in just a second. So if I share my screen again, just in answer to your question. So the ones that we did focus on within the French, Spanish and German lessons are poverty, hunger, well-being and health, quality education, equality between the sexes, clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption, which was a really interesting one around clothes and whether we buy things responsibly, whether we buy too much food and whether we dispose of too much food. We've got life underwater, life on land, and then the one that I think has been the most well received has been Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which was the one around climate action, which, as you know, is the hot topic of the moment. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope that you've enjoyed that. And thank you for your lovely comments in the chat. As I said earlier, if any of you joined us late, I think that you will find that the presentation, so the video recording will be sent to you. I've also sent a kind of an abridged version of my slides across to the host organizer, Jonathan, who will make sure that you're sent those via email. So thank you ever so much, all of those of you who've joined us from all over the world. I would love to hear from you after the session. I hope you found that useful. I'm just going to quickly check in the chat that there aren't any other questions. I think, Anthony, I have answered your question. So I hope that's everybody had their questions answered. Let me just check once more. I think we've got a couple more comments in the Zoom chat. That's awesome, inspiring. Thank you. It really is something that's very close to my own heart, and I have to say that although I was paid to write these resources. It was a paid piece of work. It was something that took hours and hours. But the reason that I wanted to get involved in this project is because it's something that I really genuinely believe in. As a languages educator, I think it's my duty, as I said in the final slides, to make sure that my learners are not just learning about what's in their pencil case or describing what's in their bedroom. I think we need to be brave with our teaching, and we need to be a bit more bold and not be scared to teach about real life world issues, and actually trying to get our learners to get involved and take action, because the future really is theirs to change. Thank you ever so much for your participation, again for your lovely comments, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. Goodbye.